I wish that United States citizens, who may follow in my precedents, never allow yourselves to be allured by the United States administration.
On trial in North Korea, it was understandable that Otto Warmbier perfectly followed the script he was given. This is footage released by North Korea, supposedly of Otto Warmbier during his December 2015 stay at the Yangakdo International Hotel. Authorities claim Warmbier stole a propaganda poster off the wall which read, "Let's arm ourselves strongly with Kim Jong-il's patriotism." He was arrested as he tried to leave the country, sentenced to 15 years hard labor. Later, Warmbier was sent home in a physical and mental condition that seemed to defy standard medical description. To understand this situation, we need to unlock some secrets. What is North Korea's prison system like, and what lesson does it hold for those fearing authoritarian personality cults around the world? Condemned in North Korea are sent to brutal prison camps with the gentle-sounding promise of reform and re-education. Now, North Korea's regime is the most secretive on earth, so I've referred to defectors, governments, nonprofit reports, and various authors to piece together an image for you. The major prison camps fall into two categories: re-education camps, Gyowaso, and political prison camps, Kwanliso, properly presented as horrible and unimaginably horrible. Gyowaso are the re-education camps run by the Ministry of Social Security. Social Security amounts to suppressing any hint of dissent against the dictator Kim Jong-un, so the ministry has informal collaborators throughout civilian life, listening in on North Korean society, spying for discontent. If an informer hears you criticize the regime or praise South Korea, they must pass this along to the ministry. Speak your mind? That's a crime. But you're more likely to be sent to a re-education camp for traditional infractions like theft, murder, or selling illegal substances. And the North Korean Criminal Code has an extraordinary list of seemingly normal behaviors that nonetheless constitute a crime, like having a haircut, which is considered subversive or anti-socialist. If you're brought to a re-education camp, it's likely to be isolated deep in the mountains, or perhaps a purpose-built village in a remote part of the country. Should you escape, you'll have nowhere to go. Should you be caught trying to escape, authorities will make an example of you through torment, public education, possibly followed by obligatory desecration of your remains by other inmates. Remember, we haven't even gotten to the bad version of the prison camps yet. While inside a re-education camp, your fellow inmates and you will spend most of your waking hours doing hard labor, dangerous mining activity, or industrial manufacturing without safety precautions. If you lose a finger or hand in a machine, you won't have access to medical care. While the point of these camps is for you to eventually finish your re-education and leave, if you don't survive, oh well. After being reformed through labor, through morning and afternoon, you spend each evening in formal re-education, repeatedly going over the written and spoken words of the ruling Kim family. Current dictator Kim Jong-un, his father Kim Jong-il, and the grandfather and eternal president of North Korea, Kim Il-sung, a demigod figure known as the fatherly great leader. To fuel your 10 to 12 hours of hard labor followed by mind-numbing ideological studies, you'll receive about a pound of corn. If 500 grams of food per day seems like a recipe for malnutrition, your family can sometimes send in food for you. That is, if your spouse and children aren't imprisoned with you. Since North Korea's founding after World War II, familial punishment has been used. In Kim Il-sung's North Korea, those accused of political crimes big and small could expect to disappear, along with their entire family. Ideally for Sung, 3 generations would be punished. Unborn children could be imprisoned while still in their mother's womb, then be born in a political prison camp. All this because their grandfather was seen as disloyal to Kim Il-sung. It's hard to wrap your head around a child raised from birth in abysmal conditions, at least until grandpa passed away, perhaps even longer. By punishing families in this way, Kim Il-sung distinguished himself even from the monstrous figure of the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. If you were accused of the worst political crimes during a Stalinist purge in Moscow, your family might be punished too, but Kim Il-sung made intergenerational punishment a normal and expected part of North Korea's justice. It must be stated that the practice of familial punishment decreased after the death of Kim Il-sung in 1994. Under his son Kim Jong-il, family punishment still occurred but was reserved for the highest political crimes. This relative restraint seems to have continued under Kim Jong-un. Family punishment still can occur today, but your relative needs to be seen as an irredeemable traitor for you to go to prison with them. And what might make one an irredeemable traitor? The absolute worst crime in North Korea is disloyalty to the Kim family. If, through words or deeds, you're perceived to threaten or condemn Kim Jong-un, his father, his grandfather, and thus the regime they've built, your fate will be so brutal that you're likely to prefer death. And make no mistake about it, immediate implementation of capital punishment is certainly an option. According to a U.S. State Department report, the law prescribes the death penalty upon conviction for the most serious cases of anti-state or anti-nation crimes, which includes treacherous destruction. However broad the opportunities for the death penalty in North Korea, public court cases and executions are not widely practiced. Show trials are exceedingly rare. In the 2013 book, The Real North Korea, I learned of the last historic show trial in North Korea, that of Pak Hong-yong, a high-ranking official who was publicly tried in 1955. Recent show trials of teenagers accused of distributing South Korean television and movies made headlines in part because it's not the norm in North Korea to make a big show out of the justice system. Another non-typical situation, the staged and televised confession of Otto Warmbier. It was the opposite of standard procedure in North Korea.
I have been very impressed by the Korean government's humanitarian treatment of severe criminals like myself, and of their very fair and square legal procedures in the DPR Korea.
The performance and humiliation of a public trial after exhausting interrogation must serve as an awful deterrent for those considering political dissent. So why does North Korea mostly avoid this intimidating practice? Well, it's because the alternative is even worse. Public trials were done early in North Korea's history, when the newest communist state on the world stage was finding its mark. As such, it conducted repression in a manner mimicking Joseph Stalin's Soviet Union, where vast purges resulted in flashy public confessions for propaganda. But Kim Il-sung came to prefer the quiet terror of disappearance. Without the spectacle of a show trial, how could a North Korean citizen even know what crime their neighbor and 3 generations of family committed before they were taken in the night, never to be seen again? By skipping the hysteria of a public event like those seen under Mao Zedong or the terrific fanfare of a Stalinist trial, Kim Il-sung could implant the deafening silence of the missing. Therefore, if you are accused of a serious political crime as a North Korean citizen, it's more likely that your friends and family will never know for sure. For treasonous offenses, there is a higher authority that will come for you, the Secretive Ministry of State Security, SSD. Perhaps they'll swipe you off the street or out of bed while you're sleeping. You aren't likely to be informed that the people grabbing you are making an arrest. You won't be informed of rights. For all you know, it's not the government, it's a kidnapping. But really, in a case like this, what's the difference? Loved ones or colleagues with suspicions won't inquire about your fate, knowing if they ask, they might disappear too. Once you're in custody for a serious political crime, you won't know the charges against you. All lawyers work for the state, so you will have no personal defense. You'll be harshly interrogated, forced to confess. You won't have a hearing. There is no bail. You won't attend your own trial. You aren't presumed innocent, rather guilty. You won't be informed of the length of your sentence. 5 years? 20? A life sentence? You won't know. Where will you be in this undefined amount of time? Will it be re-education or might it be execution? You won't know. The fear of physical pain is almost dwarfed by the psychological terror of not knowing why all of this started or whether it will end in a normal re-education camp or the worst fate of all, the Kwanli-so. Life in the second kind of prison camp, a Kwanli-so political prison camp, is a near certain death. Only the very few who escape survive, and thus we have little certainty about camp conditions. If a family is in prison, they're kept separate from the offenders, so we know even less about the fate of those who are the primary target for punishment. So how many of these worst of the worst camps are there? During the rule of Kim Il-sung, there may have been a dozen. By one account, Sung had a larger proportion of his population in political prison than Joseph Stalin in 1950. But since the 1980s, the number of these Kwanli-so camps has dropped to around 6, and the proportion of prisoners has likely reduced. Totals hover between an estimated 150 and 200,000. The reason the Kwanli-so are not considered re-education camps is because prisoners won't ever complete the re-education. They remain in these camps until death, often just months after arrival. As in the re-education camps, prisoners are kept in primitive shelter, in distant isolation, to work long days of hard labor followed by evening indoctrination sessions. Despite lower food rations and thus lower energy, a prisoner's failure to meet work quotas is severely punished. This can take the form of a routine beating coupled with even less food. For repeat offenders, each Kwanli-So has a segment of isolated cells for even more brutal beatings and starvation. It's easy to imagine how this can become a loop that leads to rapid deterioration and death. All this can sound hyperbolic, but general treatment in the camps is sadistic. Prisoners must grovel for camp personnel. Authors O and Hassig write that guards are trained to see inmates as animals. They report that if a prisoner attempts to escape by taking their own life, they're singled out by guards for unimaginably worse treatment. In his book, Patrick McEachern quotes the Database Center for North Korean Human Rights, detailing denial of food, medicine, familial punishment, public execution, forced infanticide, sometimes the mother must do it themselves, beating, and torture. So then was Otto Warmbier sent to one of these Kwanli-So? And why? I don't mean the given reason for his arrest, going to the forbidden floor of a hotel and stealing a poster to harm the work ethic and the motivation of the Korean people. No, what I mean is, why was the arrest and then subsequent murder of an American in the interest of the system of North Korea? What happened to Otto Warmbier? At the very least, the North Koreans denied him necessary medical care. So yeah, it does seem that Otto Warmbier was in one of these Kwanli-So. If not a Kwanli-So precisely, he was given treatment that mimicked one. Otto Warmbier was taken off life support less than a week after the North Koreans hurriedly returned him to the United States in June 2017. Warmbier's parents and doctors received him in critical condition. According to his father, body deformed between a coma and insanity, what the BBC reported doctors described as an unresponsive wakefulness. His eyes were able to blink, but he was in a, quote, persistent vegetative state. A later court filing stated complaint included that Warmbier had been, quote, destroyed with a devastating brain injury. He also had a large scar on his left foot and traumatic dental injuries. Classified information pointed to multiple beatings. But again, why was this done? I'm not asking about Kim Jong-un's motivation. He, his father, grandfather have a track record of arresting foreigners, particularly Americans, for leverage, perhaps to induce a high-level visit, or prisoner exchanges, or sanctions relief. There's a goal, a logic. My confusion is more precise. Why would the North Korean system kill a prisoner or treat them so badly they die? That achieves nothing. They couldn't believe it's in their interest, right? I think the answer to this question lies in the secretive terror we spoke of earlier. The North Korean justice system inflicts re-education, death, and other punishments without telling people why. If you're arrested by the Ministry of State Security, you are kidnapped in the night to be given a secret sentence. Neighbors and colleagues won't know why you're gone, won't know if they're committing the exact same crime right now without realizing it. And so the missing piece here is that those within the justice system are also subject to the secretive terror they inflict on others. They are not exempt from the awful randomness. When people around them disappear, they also don't know the real reason why. Thus, they also have the same fear of making a mistake they don't realize they're making. North Korean reality is paranoia for everyone at all times. Now, imagine the paralysis in a system like this. Officials of all rank must almost never act with autonomy for fear of being held accountable in the same judicial and prison system they know so intimately. Independent judgment must be a rarity. Now, imagine you're the jailer in charge of Mr. Warmbier. His life is slipping away either due to purposeful treatment or by neglect. Do you speak up to your superior? Probably not, for fear of being blamed and subject to the same treatment. You know it well. Now, imagine you're in charge of the jail and one of your jailers tells you something is very wrong with this high-profile prisoner. Do you speak up to your superior? Probably not. The same equation plays out all the way up the chain. A line of men unwilling to step out of line in any way, shape, or form because the rules aren't clear, and violating them could mean a fate worse than death. My conjecture is that this played out for months, until it was too late to save Otto's life. Maybe one day we'll know for sure. In all this darkness surrounding North Korean prisons, is there a glimmer of hope for those opposed to our world's seemingly untouchable authoritarianism? How has a system based on this much arbitrary terror, a system this paralyzed with fear, even survived this long? Is there no weakest link to break the chain? There's a wide range of crimes in North Korea, from traveling without a permit, joining a civic organization or religion, riding a bike or wearing pants as a woman, to having a subversive haircut. And on top of it all, hundreds of thousands in re-education and death camps. Why hasn't this whole system collapsed? Kim Il-sung's power within North Korea was absolute by the mid-1950s. Like Big Brother from Orwell's 1984, Sung's face hung in the home of every North Korean. Government radios sang his praises. The volume could be turned down, but there was no way to turn them off. Sung wasn't alone. Stalin's Soviet Union and Mao's China ran similar personality cults built on purges and fear, and all three men ruled until their natural deaths in their 70s and 80s. Well, Mr. William C. Fox, where's the hope in that? It's in what happened after these men died. Joseph Stalin's successor, Nikita Khrushchev, told his Soviet Party Congress in 1956, quote, "Comrades, we must abolish the cult of the individual decisively, once and for all, because of its harmful consequences." Mao's successor, Deng Xiaoping, influenced a party document that read, "The cult of Comrade Mao Zedong was frenziedly pushed to an extreme." Now, neither Deng nor Khrushchev were liberal reformers, but things did relax in a relative sense. But no such change took place in North Korea. Kim Il-sung's regime survived even after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Kim Il-sung's cult of personality perseveres without check even today. Even while people starved during a famine in the 1990s, the terror never ended. The number who were arrested and ended in prison camps in this famine period is, quote, countless, according to Andrei Lankoff. Even at North Korea's most vulnerable moment, the horror of the system didn't blink. What was the distinction? Why was North Korea's justice system able to continue without interruption? Stalin and Mao and countless other dictators, emperors, and mad kings failed to establish a clear transition, a plan for after their deaths. Sung's system never collapsed because he ensured a clear path of succession. He had his son, Kim Jong-il, presented in 1980, 14 years before his death. Kim Jong-il handled most governance and ensured his father would remain as North Korea's eternal president after his corporeal end in 1994. Like his father, Kim Jong-il took time to find a successor, passing over an older son before settling on Kim Jong-un, who walked with the hearse at his father's funeral in 2011, ensuring the cult of personality for a third generation. The faint glimmer of hope is that today our most notable authoritarian cults of personality have thus far failed to plan a clear line of succession. Take your pick. Putin's Russia, Xi's China, each have their peculiarities. For each it's possible someone as brutal will rise next, but neither have made clear efforts like the North Koreans have over generations. The silver lining is that the worst excesses of power built around one man are not forever self-sustaining without a clear plan for the day after that man dies. Small hope for a world seized with fatalism. Heads held high. Happy warriors. Later, y'all.